Fabian Vogelsteller is a blockchain veteran who was part of the Ethereum Foundation in its very early days. From 2015 to 2018, he helped shape the Ethereum space, building an ETH Wallet and a Web3 browser, which were one of the first of their kind. He is the co-founder of the Lukso blockchain, and together with Vitalik Buterin, created the ERC20 token standard, a foundational building block for Ethereum. So what does Fabian hope to achieve with his new venture, and what brought him to the space? Fabian, it's so great to have you here on the Defiant podcast.
Hi, nice to have you. To have me. You having me. Have you here also on my screen.
It's nice to be chatting, let's just say. So we were just saying, like, it's probably been a couple of years since we talked. I interviewed Fabian for my book, The Infinite Machine, of course, as he was such a key, he played such a key role in the development of Ethereum and the Ethereum ecosystem. So now it was about time that we caught up, and I'm interested to hear in what's your latest. To start, though, can you get into just like explaining what the latest is? Like, what's Lukso blockchain, how it's different from other blockchains, in just like give us a recap, and then we'll go all the way back into kind of how you got into crypto.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the latest is basically I'm working on this project called Lukso. We're building a blockchain, an EVM blockchain, Ethereum-like network for the digital lifestyle, new creative economy, this kind of use cases. And it's basically starting a network, but also coming with new standards and new basic ways of how you do things on the blockchain, because we are still running on Ethereum and on all the other blockchain on the same core standards that we have proposed like 5 years ago. So Lukso is not only a blockchain for the next wave of use cases, more social, more community oriented, more creative, content creators, artists, metaverse, digital fashion, VR, all of these things, but also with the right building blocks to even make that possible in the first place. So a whole new network, in short, with a bunch of new standards and a bunch of cool tools to do that.
Nice. Okay, we'll definitely get into the specifics of those standards and tools. But first, how did you get started with crypto and Ethereum?
I mean, I got started with crypto in 2013, heard about Bitcoin, followed all of this, got super excited about Bitcoin because, first off, like the price went literally from $10 to $260 in a month. That was already impressive enough, but I realized it's super cool tech. And then all of these altcoins popped up, so it was really interesting to follow the whole altcoin era, the copies of Bitcoin that happened, and it became my hobby in 2013, 2014, and 2015. In January, I was fortunate enough to join the Ethereum Foundation, was able to transition from being a web developer to be a Web3 developer. And that early on, and in the position that I was the lead app developer of Ethereum. I could build a lot of like very early tools that the space is using today, together with Alex van der Sande and other people at the team. We basically built, the building blocks. And as one of the more internally vocal developers, I happened to create a lot of standards or define a lot of things that, still are the way how we do things today on Ethereum. I mean, ERC20 is one thing you mentioned. I just wrote the spec initially. The draft came from Vitalik, and it became the first smart contract standard. We called it Ethereum Request for Comment, ERC. The whole idea was we discuss and then we make a standard. The ERC20 became the actual standard on the end. This kicked off this whole blockchain wave, including ICOs, DeFi, and NFTs that we have today. I worked on the first Web3 browser. I worked on tools like Web3.js, which is how you build dApps, and or mostly how you build dApps on the JavaScript level. Also defined the communication of how a Brave browser or MetaMask talks to a dApp. Lots of things on this low level because Ethereum was kind of the core people building the nodes. And then there were people like Alex and me, Marek, and there were just really a few that were building these tools that make things easy to use for developers. And then when you are like one of these few people, you happen to do a lot of things that are important today in this space. So.
Very cool. Fabian, what makes you defiant?
What is defiant?
Defiant means challenging the incumbent or the normal order of things, or the way things are usually done.
I'm interested in the future. I'm interested in what's coming next, and I have a very good intuition of what's coming next. I mean, that's what I learned throughout my life, and I'm also very anti-authority. I don't like being told, rules, and I like to challenge rules. And blockchain tech is literally like a really good way of like even doing that on a ground level. And like with all of the standardization and I got kind of pulled into the standards space. It was never my intention to create standards ever. I mean, it was really just like I happened to propose this standard and then becomes popular. But I really learned then over time that there's a certain way to think. If you want to create a standard, there's a certain way you have to think these things through, right? You don't want to create something that's overly biased towards what you want to do, because then nobody wants to adopt it. And it can also not be too flexible, because then it's hard to use, but it can also not be too specific. So you have to find a balance between, it has to be open, it has to be neutral enough, unbiased enough, but it also has to be specific enough and open enough at the same time. And I happened to have some ideas that seemed to make sense, and out of this came then later other standards that I created, like ERC7 to 5, which is literally like the basis of Lukso, and probably the basis of future blockchain identity. And and now it's basically almost like an explosion of standards ideas, because once I realized how much you can do with just this 7 to 5 standard, and what you can build on top of this is like you can now standardize so much stuff on top of that standard. And because it is very flexible, and now it becomes this massive amount of extra things you can standardize. So now I'm in the massive standardization bubble, basically, to standardize a lot of things, a lot of things possible later on. But the interesting thing is about this standardization is you build Lego blocks, right? And with Lego blocks, people can build a lot of cool things. And the whole blockchain space still runs on the same Lego block. I mean, let's say there's like 3. There's like tokens, and then there's NFTs, and maybe there's some kind of like protocol kind of things that we use, or DAO you could see as a Lego block. And the whole space is literally working with these 3 Lego blocks, and everything else more like a combination of those. That's first very little, and second, they have the problem that they were created not with a lot of thinking, but they were created because there was a demand. We created the token standard because people wanted to make tokens. It's not because we had a lot of time thinking, hey, let's think this through and then we make tokens. It was like, oh my God, people want tokens. Let's come up with something what it can be a token. And the beautiful thing, if you create like this next wave of standards, you can actually correct the mistakes of the past, rethink what was done wrong, how you can do it right. You can also do a lot of cleanup that you cannot do when people want to be always backwards compatible, right? That's I think also a problem. Like people try to always be backwards compatible because now there's MetaMask. There's 3, 5, 4 wallets that kind of some can use these tokens, and now you always want to be compatible to that. And if you rethink this from the scratch, and you can make it better, and you have a new network, and you have a new set of use cases which will bring a complete new user, you don't even need to bother that much. I mean, you can make these things compatible, backwards compatible. It's not hard, but there's also no real need to do that. That's the good thing, actually.
Nexo is a go-to platform for all things crypto. Invest in the hottest coins out there and start earning interest of up to 20% paid out daily. Need cash ASAP but don't want to sell? Use your crypto as collateral and receive a credit line at premium rates. Open your account at nexo.io till March 31st and receive up to $100 welcome bonus. That's nexo.io. The ERC20 token standard was officially recognized in 2017. The purpose was to set a replicable template for those who wanted to create and issue smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain. Smart contracts can then be used to create smart property or tokenized assets. What existing problems did ERC20 solve, and what shape will it take in the future?
I mean, the thing is, there were not a lot of tokens before ERC20. In fact, there was one token. So there was the DigX protocol that wanted to make a token for their gold, like a gold representation for their assets they created. And they were like, they didn't want it or could wait before like people agreed on the standard. So as we started with ERC20 proposal and discussion, they already decided to go with their own way of doing it. So once ERC20 became a thing, they actually had to migrate the whole token in order to be compatible. I don't know actually of any other token before DigX.
So people were like waiting. They were waiting for this.
And because ERC20, this was it was October 2015. So the network was 6 months old or something like this. Right? So there was not a lot of massive activity before that in terms of tokens or any of these things. People just figured out how to do smart contracts and do things like this. So there was no token economy on Ethereum before that. ERC20 literally started the token economy. There was a more limited version of ERC20, I guess. And the ones which were totally incompatible, they redeployed that token eventually to be compatible. So there was no life before ERC20 on Ethereum for tokens.
Wow. Very cool. Okay, so then Vitalik proposed this token standard.
He wrote the initial draft and he wrote it in the wiki page. And so basically we were discussing in this Ethereum wiki page, hey, he actually wrote 3 different specs, like one for a registry, one for a token and so on. And we discussed things and I changed a few things, for example, the order of the parameters and so on. And at the same time, there was this EIP repository being created by Martin Bisi. So Martin Bisi wanted to create this repository to discuss Ethereum protocol improvements called EIPs. And I thought, hey, this is actually a great space to also have this standards discussion, because now this is official place where you can discuss these kind of things. And I wanted to differentiate it from an EIP, because EIP is more like, how to improve Ethereum as a protocol, right? And this was more a smart contract standards discussion. So I called it ERC, which was leaned on this RFC process in the web, in the web 2, right? There's this request for comment process when they are discussing, web standards. And, called it Ethereum request for comment, wrote a proper specification, changed a few things up, and we started discussing there. By that point, I think Vitalik already put himself almost out. There was only other people discussing. In total, there were like 60 people or so participating, but we didn't really change much from that initial, spec that I wrote then from this wiki page there, which we discussed a bit there. And we also thought about things like, hey, should we, when you send a token to a smart contract, should we inform this smart contract? And we did a lot of these kind of discussions, but on the end, we tried to keep it simple, because first, you need to you need adoption on something, and we didn't even know how this kind of thing works and how does adoption works and how do we agree on like the standard. And today is still kind of like a very let's say organic process, right? If somebody comes up with a standard, then there's no final ta-da and now it's ready and everybody jumps using it. It's more like an organic thing. People start using it, it gets a bit adopted here and there, and then people see, oh, okay, it gets traction, and it moves from a quasi standard to an actual standard. In fact, we only put the final tag on the ERC20. I put the final tag in September 2017. That was 2 years after the ICOs. Because by that time I thought, okay, now nothing will change here anymore. So let's make it final. It was already literally final since years before. It was literally final like 5 months after the proposal, I would say.
Crazy that it was finalized after the whole ICO thing happened. So
Yeah.
people
I mean,
were
it didn't really
issuing all
change,
those
right?
tokens.
It didn't change. It just had like the final tag not on there. So yeah.
Okay. What are the key features or like parameters of the ERC20 token?
I mean, it's really a simple thing. There's just a balance function. So balance off function, you can read, what balance a person has or an address has. Yeah, there's a transfer function to transfer it from you. If you have a balance, you can transfer. And there's this approve and transfer from. And that's kind of like the hack that we built in to allow a smart contract to like understand that he gets tokens. And that's also one of the big problems that we have today, which makes ERC20 a bit unflexible. So if you want to transfer a token to a decentralized exchange smart contract, for example, the problem is you actually only talk to the token contract and you say, hey, can you please just move this balance from my address to this decentralized exchange address? But this token contract does not talk to the decentralized exchange contract. It literally just like subtracts internally the balance from my address and adds it internally to the balance of the decentralized exchange. And the decentralized exchange has no idea that you just got a new balance. And that's why you use this kind of approve and transfer from. And the idea is that you approve the decentralized exchange for a certain amount, and then you call a function on this decentralized exchange, say, hey, decentralized exchange, talk to the token contract and pull in this amount from my balance, because you're now allowed to do that. And because the contract can do that and you can check that he actually got the balance, he then can act on this and do something. Like, for example, put an order or swap a token or whatnot. Obviously, this requires 2 transactions, right? And it's not a very convenient user flow. And that's, for example, something that we have changed in these new token standards. And this was already proposals in other token standards. That basically what you do is every single time there's a transfer, the token contract has to inform that receiving contract. And you obviously need to agree on that function that informs the other contract. And that's, I guess, where this new standard differs from what other people have tried on Ethereum today, because everybody came up with their own function name, which makes implementing a generic wallet or a generic profile pretty complicated. So there's a lot of things that we can improve and that we have now improved on just these simple things, right? Because it's really like not so clear to people that a token, there's Ether, or the native cryptocurrency or the native token of the blockchain that's inherently built in. So you transfer this from A to B, and a smart contract knows when he receives this. But a token is just a smart contract with a balance. So if you talk to that smart contract, then like if this smart contract doesn't inform any other, then they don't know about that. So it's literally its own little isolated registry, if you want.
Wow.
It works very different than Ether does, for example.
Why?
Because it's one is a token, one is built into the system, the other is a smart contract, basically.
I see. Okay,
I mean, it looks from the outside, right? It's a token that you transfer, but the one thing is a smart contract, the other is just inherently built into the system.
It's so crazy to think that tokens are just smart, like these like very simple smart contracts that just have a balance and
It's just registries,
yeah.
basically. Yeah, it's just registries with a bunch of entries. I mean, and smart contracts can have a lot of entries, which is quite impressive, right? If you look at USDT token, I mean, the USDT ERC20 token, I think, has over 1 million holders. So there's over 1 million entries in the smart contract that say address so-and-so has this amount and address so-and-so has this other amount.
And all it does, like,
So you can write a lot of entries in the smart contract.
and all that happens when there's a transfer is that the internal balance of that smart contract changes. Like it says, okay, this address now has this amount and this new address now has whatever it was sent. And that's it.
Exactly. And for an NFT, it's really just you basically say, okay, this ID now maps to this address, and now it maps to
Okay,
another
definitely
address.
want to
So,
like we'll get into NFTs, but yeah, okay. Let's wrap finish with the ERC20. So that's super interesting. And then what you're saying is that it's inefficient to have like these transfers, and then like in addition, like calls to other smart contracts. So it's like the
No, this is the actually more efficient way of. So the thing is, there's this big cool thing in Ethereum called composability. Composability means that I can have a lot of smart contracts talking to each other. So, for example, if I talk from a key to a smart contract, that's me, just my key signs a message and talks to the smart contract. For example, hey, calls the transfer function, right? Transfer my balance. But the address that owns the balance could also be a wallet smart contract. It could be not just a key, but it could be a wallet that has a bit more functionality. So now the wallet smart contract talks to the token and says, hey, transfer my balance. And you can actually have up to 1024 calls within one transaction. For one smart contract calls another, calls another, calls another, calls another. Obviously, you mostly don't get to the 1,000 calls because your gas is already used up like after 5 or whatever. But you technically can do that. And the thing is, if I transfer a token, I really normally don't know about. The other smart contract that receives it doesn't know that he received any balance, right? And this is solved. This is complicated, like a proof and transfer from, where you do need to make 2 transactions. And this is something that you can easily do by making the token contract talk to the other contract that receives
and that's the innovation.
These are all very technical problems, but they are, making a big difference. They're making my token being easy to send around and easy to be understood by protocols, or it's a complicated flow, a complicated step.
Okay, so the difference with the new token standard that you're creating for Lukso is that now tokens directly speak with other smart contracts.
Basically, but this is actually not the really new thing, because already other token standards like 223 and 777 did the same. The new thing here is all of them came up with their own function. For example, if you use 223, I think it's called token received. So if you want to be a DEX, a decentralized exchange, that now wants to be able to receive a 223 token, it needs to have a token receive function. And that function will be called when a new 223 token came in. And then this DEX can do something, can act on it, right? ERC777 called it tokens received, or the other way around. I don't know. I don't remember which one called it. But they call it almost the same, but there's an S in there. Tokens received, not token received.
Okay.
ERC721, the NFT, calls it on ERC721 token received. So that's all, okay. If I build a protocol that should only work with one type of standard, or these 3 types of standard, I can just add these 3 functions and now I can receive them. But if we want to build a generic wallet or a universal profile on a blockchain that can receive any asset, right? And that can also be assets that are not yet invented, we have a problem, right? If we now have a function that we have to build in for every asset that comes up, then I cannot have a profile that's not even lasting a year, right? Because like maybe after a year, there's this new standard that like requires now the on ERC 1500 received, or whatever it's called, and I don't have that function. So I can't receive this asset. I can't act on this asset. So basically we came up with something called a universal receiver function. So there's a universal receiver function that is just called universal receiver, actually. And by having a universal function that has a type ID and some data you can pass in, you can now, every asset can just call the same function. And the type ID then determines how a smart contract will act on it. And what we can do in smart contracts is we can say, okay, I can't change. So the function is now built into my profile or my wallet, right? I can't change the logic of this function. But what I can do internally in my wallet is I can delegate my logic to another contract that I can upgrade. So every time somebody tries to call my universal receiver function, I can now change the logic of how I behave, because I have that in another contract sitting, which I can then change over time. If I can change this one over time, I'm now able to act on any future asset. And I can even build logic like reject the token, reroute the token, do whatever I want, right? If I build a DEX, I can make that DEX be compatible to any future asset. Because every future asset will have to use the universal receiver function, because it's a common interface that everybody understands.
Perfect.
So that's,
Okay.
like the standardization thing that makes, like a lot of things flexible or a lot of things like very unflexible.
So that's kind of the new token that you're using. Not only speaks with smart contracts directly, but is also able to be flexible in the kinds of assets that it can interact with, and what it does with those interactions.
No, actually, the other way around. So the universal receiver is always on the receiving contract. So if it's a wallet or a profile or whatever. But the token standards, be it an NFT or be it just a token, both of them will call the same universal receiver function on whatever smart contract they want to interact with. And that makes them very much the same. They behave the same, even though there's different type of standards. Actually, the real big deal is that not only have we created this like universal receiver that we added to these tokens, but we also unified the names. For example, all the functions are called transfer. They only have like one different parameter, so they all look very much the same between an NFT and a normal token. It almost looks the same. We only make the changes that are necessary. The rest looks the same, which actually makes it easier for developers to kind of guess the names rather than having a safe transfer and a transfer and the other calls it send and everybody calls it different. We just have it's called transfer, and the only difference is one parameter in your function. And the other thing, and I think this is the most valid for normal people, is that you cannot, because we're now living in this world where the basis of your accounts will be blockchain-based profiles, not anymore accounts. You can basically say, okay, you can now transfer tokens only to either blockchain-based profiles or to smart contracts who can actually receive your token and know what to do with it. And by making this restriction in this standard by default, we literally prevent people from losing assets, right? Because today you can send your token to any address. That means also you can send it to addresses that nobody owns. They're not even like private keys existing for that, or smart contracts that then do not know how to handle these tokens. I mean, there's so many smart contracts that have tokens on them, they can never move them away because these smart contracts just don't have the logic for that. So by saying by default tokens can only be sent to contracts that implement a universal receiver, you literally prevent these losses, because every smart contract that has a universal receiver will either reject the token if you allow it, or reject it if it doesn't understand it. And therefore, you don't lose so easily your assets.
Very
also, everybody should have a blockchain-based profile. So everybody should have their assets on smart contracts rather than on keys. And that's actually the big shift. And I guess this is the big, statement that I'm doing now all the time is we should not store anything on keys. Storing things on keys is a very stupid idea because the chance of losing your assets is extremely high. First, it makes onboarding very hard because if you tell people, hey, here you create this wallet, but there's this super secret that you should never lose, nor you can ever expose. And the only way to change your secret is to move all of your assets away from that address to another address. That's obviously not cool, right? If you make a smart contract-based account, which can be not just a wallet, but a profile that looks like a user profile in the Web 2, you can actually make these things very easy to use, because now you can start out with a very simple security, because on the beginning you have nothing of value on these profiles, and then you upgrade security as the value increases. And you can literally switch the keys that control this profile without a problem. So the keys are not so important anymore. They're switchable, right? They are like that's something you can replace. And on a pure key, when you just store your stuff on an address, you can't replace it, right? There's only one password for it. That's the private key. There's no other. Can't change it, right? So, and that's like what these universal profiles, which are based on the 725 standard that I mentioned before, basically make possible. They completely change the user experience of how we can interact with blockchain. And I think this is direly needed because using blockchain is hard, and most people do not use blockchain. They may have like some assets on an exchange, or they may have managed to move it to MetaMask, but that's where the interaction with blockchain stops for most people, right? Because everything beyond that is very scary. and it's really easy to lose your stuff. So
This podcast is sponsored by Sirion. Sirion is mission control for Web3, giving users the ability to trade DeFi tokens, transfer assets across chains, and show off their NFT collections all in one place. Sirion offers a multi-chain experience with asset tracking and trading across 7 networks, including Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum, and BSC. So you'll never miss an opportunity waiting on gas fees to drop. NFT owners can also see their favorite collectibles and art widgets on their iPhones or Apple Watches and send them to friends and family in a few clicks. Users can explore every corner of the metaverse with Sirion from their web, desktop, and mobile apps. Head to Sirion.io to connect your wallet and get started today. The introduction of blockchain-based profiles as opposed to accounts would be a seismic shift. Fabian believes this is an approach that would improve usability and protect users' assets. What are the fundamental differences between a user account and a user profile? And what added functionality is available with a blockchain profile?
So basically, you can obviously have a backup phrase if you want to. So one of the controlling keys of your profile can be based on a backup phrase if you want to. But now you can basically have multiple keys controlling your profile and even other smart contracts. So multiple keys means your profile can be controlled by multiple devices, right? Losing one device is not the end of having access to your profile, because there's maybe another device that has access. You could now have a custodian service that you trust, that you may pay a yearly fee, that has a recovery key, that if you lose your stuff, you go to them, you prove that you're you, and you get back to your profile, right? Or you could even have social recovery. So you can have a smart contract that says, hey, if your friends agree, they can give you access back to your profile. You could even have a smart contract that somehow, uses some clever algorithm to give you access to your profile, or some time lock system or whatever else. Now, basically, it's endless.
Is this like smart contract wallet like Argent are doing?
So in a basic form, yes. In the more detailed form, no. So Argent is a wallet that has different keys that can access it, and they also for sure have built a lot of extra features. The difference to an ERC20 account or these universal profiles is that this is purely based on standard components. And everything is standardized, from like the core contract, how it looks like, from the key manager, from the universal receiver delegate, and all of these things are standards-based pieces. So there can be many implementations of those, but it's just a clear way of how they work together, and this is all standardized. It's technically like Argent wallet is meant as a wallet, and you could ask the question: so why is this thing called the profile and the other is called the wallet? And I guess the big difference is that a ERC20 account / universal profile has also the ability to attach endless amount of information on it. So your smart contract, your core smart contract, has a generic key value store that you can extend as much as you want. So you now can write all kinds of information into your profile. So for example, you can link a JSON file that has a name, a description, links to your websites or social media, and links to a profile picture and a background picture. Or you can reference assets that you have received. Because, for example, if you now want to know what your Argent wallet owns, or you want to know what your key owns, you have to go to Etherscan, right? You enter the address and you say, I have all of these tokens. But if you want a decentralized system and you look at the address on the blockchain, you have no way to know what assets this address owns. Because if you look just on the blockchain and the current state, you would have to traverse all smart contracts on the blockchain to find out if there's some tokens that have a balance of your address. Or you have to go back in history, go through all transactions that ever happened, and see if there's ever a transaction that made a token transfer to your address. That's also changing because we have this key value store in our profiles. We can now, when you receive an asset, and because the asset informs your profile, the profile actually writes into the storage of the profile that it received this asset. So now we can write inside the profile itself what smart contracts have a balance of it, of this profile, like have some tokens or NFTs of it.
Got it.
And that means I can now reestablish not only a profile on a website that looks good and has a profile picture and some text and everything, but also I can literally decentralize, read all the assets that it owns and check all the right smart contracts for the right balances.
Cool.
Because it's all written within the profile. So I have basically a really truly decentralized account / profile.
Very
and
cool.
The beauty is it's a generic thing. So if somebody comes up with some cool protocol, like a follower system protocol or a decentralized posting feed like Twitter or Facebook, if somebody builds any of this kind of stuff, attaching this to your profile is as simply as defining a new key, standardizing it. We can all agree what this key name looks like and what the content looks like, and we all have a cool protocol attached to it. And now every website who understands this protocol can simply show the Twitter feed or this decentralized Twitter feed that you have, or your decentralized follower or rating system, or social points or whatever people come up with.
And so will these universal profiles, which I think is really cool to be able to attach like social media links to your blockchain profile, maybe like an NFT avatar that you want to use for it, that it can automatically keep an up-to-date track of all your assets, and also have like the full history of your activity and all these things in one place. I think it's really cool. Will this? So this is based on the ERC20 standard, these universal profiles, and that's what you're using for Lukso. As like these are like Lukso's wallets instead of like.
Yeah, we call them not wallets. I mean, they're not wallets. They're also wallets, but they're profiles.
But yeah, just like analogous to like Ethereum wallets, these are kind of Lukso's wallets, but they're profiles.
Yeah. So the thing is, you can obviously, Lukso is an EVM blockchain, so you could use MetaMask and you can just use standard keys.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be a very stupid idea because of all the fallacies that we know they have. And when you make a blockchain-based account, you can actually have, a proper account that looks like something. You want to gain reputation on something that has a face and that you actually start liking.
Right.
If you're a creative artist, if you're an NFT artist, you will care about your account. You will start issuing NFTs only from that one account. Once you have followers there, you start really caring about your blockchain-based identity.
Also, you can have followers on your profile?
I mean, we haven't built that standard yet, but it's some standard you could build. It's easy to, it's not hard to do.
Cool.
Right? It's more like a matter of somebody can do it, we can do it. It's just a matter of time because we're building a lot of core standards. But yes, you can obviously build it.
Right.
You can build a decentralized follower system. I mean, all the standards that we have right now, it's not that hard to do, actually.
It makes sense. Like, it's like the world is built on followers. It makes sense that you'll have followers on your blockchain profile.
I mean, in a decentralized way, building this in a decentralized way is first a bit more complicated and different, and has also different properties. Because here things are a bit different, right? So I can say that I'm following you, but your profile doesn't need to accept the request to write into your profile that I follow you.
Okay.
So that means I can either allow people writing to my profile that they starting following me, or can also reject that. So now, it creates a complete different, you have to think about this differently because there's no central database, right, where it says, hey, this guy's following that guy. You could build a registry that says this, but the question is, do you want to accept this followership or not? I mean, there's a lot of thinking that you have to do around that. It's the same with NFT authenticity, right? If you want to build NFT authenticity in a decentralized way, it's a bit more complicated if you want to make this readable by other smart contracts. Because what smart contracts cannot do is they cannot go into the past, look through all transactions, and then figure out if you ever created a certain smart contract and did something. A smart contract cannot know that, right? Neither can a smart contract go to the internet and ask questions. I mean, maybe with like an oracle like Chainlink, but that's very expensive and slow. But a smart contract can not easily look at this smart contract address and say, hey, this was deployed by this address. They cannot. I mean, Etherscan can do that, but Etherscan is a centralized service. A smart contract cannot know that. So in order to make a smart contract be able to understand if an NFT is authentic or not, you actually have to create two things. First, you have to have a universal profile that points to the NFT that it created. And second, you have to have the NFT pointing back to you to the universal profile that it was created from. And basically, the smart contract need to read in both of their flexible ERC20Y storages, again, this key value store. Any smart contract that wants to check if this is authentic needs to check on both sides. Hey, are you saying that you were created by this guy and that this guy say he's created you? And only when both say yes, this model can be certain that it was created by that guy. And that's something that's impossible right now on with this current standards and on Ethereum. And people say, oh yeah, I created my NFT and I can always go back in time. Sure, if you use a centralized service that you trust, but also this is not really fast forward thinking, because what if we have blockchain pruning tomorrow, right? What if we have the ability to create a new anchor block and throw away the whole past, but have a super secure way of reading our blockchain from like 1 month ago on? That would be very useful if you want to be GDPR compliant, for example. So, and if you want to have a bit more privacy on the blockchain, forget the past, basically. But now, you have a big problem proving that this NFT was actually created by you, right? If this is written in the state of the smart contract, if it's written in the profile and written in the NFT, it's always verifiable. And it's verifiable by smart contracts. And that's the most important thing, actually.
Right, because you can have a system that like automatically tells you like if an NFT is legit or not, which has been such a major issue for OpenSea and for all the marketplaces, like all the scams on it.
Exactly.
If this was like in the smart contract, then there wouldn't be an issue. Like NFTs would be automatically legitimized and verifiable. Yeah. Unstoppable Domains is the #1 provider of NFT domains. With your unique NFT domain, such as camilla.crypto or camilla.nft, you can replace your long, complex wallet address, verify ownership of your NFT, log into Web3 apps, and join tens of thousands of people using them as their Twitter usernames. Better yet, with Unstoppable Domains, you don't have to worry about gas or renewal fees, and you own them forever. Go to unstoppabledomains.com and get yourname.crypto.x.nft or a range of other endings for as low as $5.
And the thing is, you can build now a true DEX, a true decentralized exchange that simply has a certain. You could build a DEX where let's say a community votes on a certain list of artists, and how do they enter the artists into the DEX? By just adding their universal profile addresses. So now the DEX can also always automatically verify if someone tries to sell an NFT, is it an authentic one of the famous people that people voted on, yes or no? And these smart contracts can do this on the fly in the moment you send the NFT and try to sell it. And that's something that's not possible right now at all. I mean, right now it's really just a massive guessing. So
interesting.
Also, when you have a universal profile, and if your universal profile creates an NFT, you start to actually have an identity that's not only in a website present, right? But it's also on-chain present. So that profile can appear in many websites, will always be that kind of artist. When he has a follower system, a decentralized one, or like, reputation system, whatnot, this is the real guy, this is the fake guy. Today, all of these NFT artists, they bet on the idea that Super Rare's website's their profile website will still be around like 2 years from now. If that thing is gone, they are just a random key on the blockchain, and nobody will know who they were. And if they don't even have taken care of that key, which they probably haven't, they don't even have they can't even prove anything anymore, right? Then anybody who could have like cloned that NFT could say, I mean, that was just a test, I'm the real guy, and this is the real NFT, this is the fake NFT. So it's all the whole standards of how this stuff works right now is a big joke, if you understand it technically, and it's not the right basis for creating any creative economy. So all of these things these tools that now come with Lukso and these standards and so on, they will fix all of this. It's now thought through, and that hasn't been thought through before. It just evolved that way, and people just went that way.
Right. But can the ERC725 standard, I mean, I assume that can be used on Ethereum as well, right?
Sure. I mean, it's a smart contract standard, can be used anywhere. The reason why it won't for now is because it's massively expensive to do something like this on Ethereum. So creating a smart contract-based account is by default, obviously, a bit more complicated than creating just a key, right? Generating a key and then putting some Ether on there and help you go is obviously cheaper. Creating a smart contract-based account, if you do it cheap and you can make a proxy-based account, you at least pay 60,000 gas for the core contract. If you want to write some profile data in there, let's say you will pay 120,000 gas for your profile. If you want to have a proper profile with key managers and everything, and you probably pay more like 300,000 gas. So that's right now, 300,000 gas would be $100 on Ethereum. So you obviously can't ask people to spend $100 just to get going, right? The other thing is also, and that's a massive feature of universal profiles as well, or this group of standards that we have created is the key manager of a universal profile can accept relay transactions. Relay transactions mean that you, as a controller of your profile, you can sign a message, but anyone can send this transaction to the network. When you have this, now other people can pay for your transaction, but you are still in control. So other people in this case will be maybe the app you're using. Right? Maybe they pay for your transaction. So you don't even have to have Lux or Ether and Ethereum, or Lux on Luxo to actually do something on the network. You just send messages. Your app will pay for it happily, right? Because they obviously want you to there, right? Or you can have public relay services, or you can have relay services has some certain business model. For example, let's say, hey, add your relay service to your profile browser extension, and then you basically get some free transaction. Let's say for the first 10 transactions you get for free. We create your profile for free, do something for free, and after that you pay us a $5 subscription per month.
Got it.
And you have 5 million gas, or let's say 50 million gas per month available. It's more like like mobile minutes or internet minutes. You can use your quota up now. When you have this, you can really make blockchain feel more like internet. Rather than this complicated, 5 steps process that people have to do right now.
It really does feel like gas costs should be something that the app at least subsidizes at first. It's just like a huge onboarding pain.
Subsidizes, that's number one. And there will be many ways of how this can be subsidized. I mean, there can be a relay service that makes you watch ads and gives you free transactions. And all you need to do is go to a website, watch an ad, and hope you have 10 transactions. And how much you do, I mean, it really depends. Right now, you wouldn't do a lot of transactions because we don't want every like on the blockchain. We want important actions on the blockchain, because using blockchain is a premium service. Like using the internet in 1990, it was a premium service. It was something you didn't download gigabytes of movies. We just watched some websites, right? Now blockchain isn't that level. So it's expensive, but it provides a very useful functionality that other systems cannot provide. That's why we are willing to pay for it, right? For example, we can create assets that are totally uncontrollable or totally decentralized. So that's a big, big feature. The other thing is we need this kind of usability and onboarding. And that's exactly why this won't happen on Ethereum. You need to be able to not only make, contracts that are a bit cheaper than $100. Number one, your profile shouldn't cost $100. It should cost you a few cents. But also the apps should pay for it, right? And they cannot obviously subsidize $100 per user. But the other thing is that because we create a new network and we obviously created a token up front, or a certain amount of token up front, we can subsidize the ecosystem in the beginning. So we can run a relay service that actually pays for users' transaction creations, and give them some quota for free. That's something that the initiators of the network, in this case us, can subsidize. And that's only possible on a new network. And then once people see that these universal profiles are the way to go, that this is the only way how we have real control, Web3 control, plus actually UX of Web2 and a proper safety, easy onboarding, and all these possibilities that come out of smart contract-based accounts. I haven't even mentioned half of them. Then people will see that. And this can only happen once you show them. And that's why you need to subsidize this. And eventually, when this becomes super popular, then there's a massive economy around relay services and different ways of how transaction fees are paid. These standards support all of this. It's so simple, so basic, so simple that anything could come out of that. And that's when you don't have an economy. I mean, for example, today, right, we use the internet. I mean, in the past it was quite complicated. You needed AOL, la. Today, everybody just pays for, they have service provider and they have internet.
Sure.
Right? In the past it was complicated to watch movies. Today we pay for Netflix and we have movies. It will be the same. You want to use blockchain, you pay for your relay service, your whatever, the one you like the most, and you have your blockchain transactions and you don't care and think about it.
That does make sense.
Right.
So how will Lukso be cheaper than Ethereum?
I mean, first off, because it's an empty network, right, initially. But also, I think this is an interesting metric. So the thing is, Lukso will work like Ethereum 2.0. So we're very much following the ETH 2.0 development with like the beacon chain, Casper, and a smart contract execution engine. So that's already more scalable than today's Ethereum with proof of work. But there's an interesting thing as well we have to see is like, if you look at Polygon, for example, Polygon is actually a network that's already full. I mean, and it's massively cheaper than Ethereum. So there's not just the simple metric of, hey, look, network is full and therefore now it's $100. People also value the security of the network. And the higher they trust the security of the network, and they do that with Ethereum, the higher they value the transactions. And that's exactly, I think, something we are seeing now with, why is Polygon cheaper than Ethereum when both of them are full now, right? And both of them have a lot of activity on it.
Interesting.
And I think it's that kind of thing. So initially, obviously, Lukso will be cheaper, will be probably very much comparable to Polygon or cheaper even. We have to see how this evolves. It's a free gas market. It's determined by validators and users, and something that's really hard to predict. But it will be probably in the range of Polygon transactions, which are in cents, like 0. something cents or cents.
But if it's only cheaper because there's not that much activity in the beginning, it's not very sustainable, right? I mean, it's the idea when you say you will follow the ETH 2.0 model, does that mean that you will have sharding? Like, how exactly do you want to scale in the long term?
But I mean, basically, it's sharding ready. Like in simple terms, it's sharding ready. It will be evolving with Ethereum. If sharding comes, we can have sharding, and sharding means you have parallelism, you have multiple chains at the same time. Okay. And that really makes this network more scalable. But at the same time, every network has that limitation. It's just a limitation of the technology right now. And even though there's some projects who claim, they're super fast and blah, 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 mostly that just means that they're more centralized. I mean, Solana, for example, requires very beefy machines to run a network. So if I say here, look, on Lukso, have like 64 gigabytes of RAM and a super fast internet connection before you can become a validator, I mean, we can like pump up the network speed by like 5x or 50x, not a big deal. But it's always this balance. If you want to have decentralization, means ideally anybody can join the network and become a validator, right? Then you need to go with common hardware. And common hardware is 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes of RAM plus what they have as internet connection. And your network should still run stable within that environment. So it's a question of centralization versus decentralization, and there's metrics. And the bounds are more or less, there are limits left and right. So either I have more centralized, I can go faster, or I have more decentralization and I'm a bit slower. But on the end, slower is still massively fast, because if you just look at how many transactions are happening on Ethereum, how much activity is on Ethereum, it's a lot of activity. If you now scale the 10x or 100x, which these proof of stake networks will be able to do, then you have even more activity. Can we onboard 1 billion people on blockchain right now? Probably not right now. Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 3 years. Really depends on the technology. And we are evolving these technologies together, right? Blockchain is open source. Open source means whenever somebody improves something, everyone else can actually benefit from that, right? And here it's not about like, oh, I'm hiding my solution and put a patent on it, and that's why I'm now the winner. Here it works differently. Here it's about, if there's a good solution and it's really good, people will adopt it. But all these blockchains that claim they have found the solution, why no one is adopting it, even though it's open source? Because it's maybe not a good solution. That's the simple answer. It's maybe not a perfect solution. So there's always trade-offs, right? And this is not patent land. This is literally open source. So it's if there's a good solution, people adopt it. That's exactly why many blockchains are EVM blockchains. They copy the Ethereum protocol for that reason, because it's a good protocol.
We can't onboard 1 billion people right now, but the tech is evolving. It's open source software. Everyone involved is contributing to it. And as the tech evolved, the goal is that we will be able to onboard 1 billion people onto these blockchains.
I mean, eventually we will obviously be able to. It's like every tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, chip development takes time. There's incremental steps to increase it. The same with like an LCD display, right? I mean, they were not like super high res Retina OLED displays. They were pretty bad looking, but look where they are right now. So there's always tech improvement, and there's obviously steps to get there. But it will take time to evolve this, because we're trying to build not only fast systems, but we're trying to build fast decentralized systems. And you don't want to sacrifice decentralization just because everybody now wants fast, right? And that is a bit more the tricky part. And when it comes to there's a clear path. And there's also a lot of different smart ways of how people try to do things. For example, Definity has a certain threshold signature system where they try to sign and fold blocks together, and then they run it in massive data centers to get this very high throughput. It does suffer of other problems, right? Composability is not as easy. The thing I described in the beginning, that you can easily make one smart contract talk to another and all of this stuff. There's other problems that they are having that need to be solved. And for example, the sharding idea is basically you just run multiple parallel chains at the same time. But now that's also a bit tricky with composability. So if I have a smart contract shard 1 and I want to talk with a smart contract on another shard, we need an asynchronous transaction. So my transaction cannot just execute at once. It has to wait for another transaction to hop to the other chain, execute this one, hop maybe to another shard, execute this one, and then it hops back, and then my thing is only final. So these kind of cross-shard transactions are the tricky part. The other thing is, obviously, if you have 1,000 shards, you don't want that your validators have to run 1,000 chains, right? That gets a bit uneconomically. And therefore, what we need actually real zero-knowledge proofs to verify these chains. So if you have real zero-knowledge proofs, that means I can basically now be a validator, verify a shard, create blocks and stuff. I can create a proof, and every validator in the whole system can just run my shard, my block that I produced in milliseconds and know it's correct or not, without running all the transaction, without doing all the complex work, just by verifying the proof. And this way I can literally, every validator could literally verify every shard, but only if you have to produce it. This is the solutions that we currently are working on, and the space is working on, and mainly Ethereum is working on, which is cross-shard transactions in the future and zero-knowledge proof verification for shards. And once this is there, we will have sharding. So that means 1,000x more whatever throughput we have right now, or maybe even more if you want that. But it will take time to get there. And right now we already have proper proof of work with Casper, which is a huge step away from proof of work, which is this massive energy wasting economy. And it's already faster because you do not need a lot of hashing and all of this stuff. So it's going step by step, right? Right now, blockchain is basically a premium market, where you can do very specific things. It's expensive, but therefore you can do things you can't do anywhere else. For example, creating money or assets.
Step Finance is the front page of Solana. Crypto moves fast, with hundreds of applications launching daily, and keeping track of it all is a full-time job. Step brings everything into one easy-to-use dashboard. Step's portfolio management dashboard enables Solana users to visualize, analyze, execute, and aggregate transactions across all Solana contracts at the click of a button. Step is built by DeFi degens for DeFi degens. Get started by visiting step.finance and connect your wallet today. The model of proof of stake, sharding, and zero-knowledge proof is supposed to enable a more scalable and decentralized blockchain ecosystem.
It's a model built for the future of Web3. How close are we to seeing this Web3 model come to life? And how will it bring the space into the mainstream?
I mean, first off, I don't think it's spearheaded by Ethereum, the mainnet, but it's probably spearheaded by the people that work around the Ethereum protocols. And that actually includes also Lukso and other EVM chains. So it's spearheaded by a lot of people working within that field. It's not the mainnet, right? And people always think Ethereum is the Ethereum mainnet, but Ethereum is mainly the foundation. A lot of people, they pay, and a huge ecosystem of other projects and chains that are also using the same protocol. That's Ethereum. The mainnet is just one instance of that Ethereum. Do I think this is the future? I mean, it's a potential evolution, right? And there will be probably many different ways and approaches. I mean, right now it will be a successful approach. The Definity approach might be also a successful approach. The thing is, I guess we have to get away from this notion that one blockchain or one winner takes them all. Because what we have so far seen is the world is very big. There's a lot of different interest groups and people and communities, and they will eventually find their network where they feel home, where they feel that it fits their community needs. It has the protocols and the apps and the tools that they find relevant for them. And this way, everybody will find their home within a certain network. That's my personal belief. And there will be many approaches. And when and how we get to the $1 billion users on blockchain, I don't know. How long it will take, I don't know. We have to see. It's a tech that needs to evolve. Can take a few years, but it will already show its impact in society no matter what. I mean, I don't know how many people use blockchain right now. Maybe it's 10 million, maybe it's 50 million, maybe it's 100 million. I don't know. But when we have actually not only blockchain users that trade DeFi and now buy little Giphies, but actually are economical actors using this technology on a daily basis, that's when real impact is made. And that's exactly why Lukso, universal profiles, and all of these standards we're building are essential, because this will bring in the real user to use blockchain that does not use blockchain right now. Because right now it's mainly early edge traders / early adopters of NFTs right now and all of these things.
Right. So Lukso, what kind of impact do you want it to have in the future? I mean, and also, like, do you see Lukso being one more in like this constellation of like EVM chains, and maybe Lukso will have like a specific use case that it focuses on?
I mean, I do believe so. I actually talked about this Internet of blockchains already, like in 2015 and 16 on some conferences. I do believe that's the case. Yeah. So I think, every blockchain will be its own, niche for its own community. The question is, how big is your niche, right? And for example, the social media niche is quite big. It's quite large, right? It's billions of people. So even though, yes, I do believe networks will form around certain, or let's say use cases will form around certain networks. So there will be a certain type of people. So if I have, for example, a network that's very much for DeFi and money things, is that the same network where the social media activity and the cultural currencies and the NFTs will happen? Probably not, because they're not really having that much overlap. Is there maybe assets that are then replicated on that DeFi network to be traded there and then maybe move back to the other network? Yes, very possible. But do they need to work on the same network when they have so little interference except on trading sometimes? Probably they will not be on the same network. So networks will have their own niche and will have their own groups that will, and users that will like flock around them. And I think that will be the way going forward for the next few months and years, I assume. Absolutely.
Makes sense. And for Lukso, again, it's like the niche is social media.
I mean, yeah, for example, maybe niche does sound a bit wrong. Maybe there's a better word for that. But basically every space that we have, every interest group, is somewhat of a niche. I mean, it really depends on the perspective where you're looking, right? If you're not into social media, it's totally a niche for you, right? If you're into social media, you think it's the whole world.
Right.
If you're into Twitter, you think everybody's on Twitter. If you're not into Twitter, you think nobody's on Twitter. I mean, this is always a matter of perspective. And these networks some will be larger, some will be smaller, some will, have more mainstream use cases. Others will have more, like whatever niche use cases that are less mainstream and so on. Yeah. And I do believe that there will be this internet of blockchains, lots of networks. They all attract different type of communities, different type of use cases, and they will be also interconnected to some degree. And that's how I see the blockchain space for the next 5 years looking.
Very cool.
If we eventually merge into the super AI-driven network or whatever, that's super decentralized and whatnot, because AI actually came up with the solutions, maybe. But that's a bit too far out to really judge that right now.
Got it. Well, super interesting to hear what you're up to. When should we expect Lukso to be like live and all this kind of being like up and running?
When mainnet, the big question of our community. We can't really tell. We're working on it. We're working on the architecture. We're working on running the network. We're actually working right now on running the L16 test network, which is the next iteration of the test network before mainnet. And then we will see how fast we get to a point where we feel comfortable, like launching the network. We're already doing the preparation for the mainnet as well. If you're a developer and you want to build on Lukso and you want to build on these kind of new tools, we have a docs page, docs.luxo.tech, where you can literally read about the new standards, learn how to build with them. You can already start building your stuff right now. You can use our L14 test network, or you can do this on an Ethereum test network, wherever you want to build your stuff. And once Lukso is ready, it's an EVM chain, you go there and you deploy your things. It's not that hard. But the new standards will be the change, and also the way of how the ecosystem and the tools that we provide around that. And so I don't know when, but definitely 2020 is the year of Lukso.
2022.
2022, yes. Wow. The 20s. The 20s.
The 20s, roaring 20s.
The 2020. Yeah, it's 2022.
Right. Got it.
The 2022. Yeah, exactly. This year that we're in right now.
Yes, this year. Awesome. Okay.
This year, not the last year. So confusing with all the Corona years.
They're all mixing together. It's all the same thing.
1 year ago, time doesn't matter anymore. We all lost our time. We are all in a niche time dimension right now. Mixed together, squeezed together.
Well, we'll be certainly keeping track and covering it in the Defiant. And so interesting to see how kind of your huge impact on Ethereum was creating all these different standards, and how now you are moving these same standards forward with your own blockchain. So super interested to see how that plays out. Thank you so much for spending time with me and walking me through all your latest progress. It's been great catching up. And thanks again for coming on the podcast.
And thank you for having me. It was a very nice chat. Thank you.